Introduction. Sensory evaluation is a scientific discipline used to analyze human reaction to food products for sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. In the dairy industry, these tests are critical for establishing consumer acceptance, benchmarking quality, and understanding market competitiveness. The objective of the study is to systematically compare consumer preference across four commercial full cream milk brands, such as Dutch Lady, Farm Fresh, Fernleaf, and Good Day. By having 30 untrained panelists rate six key attributes such as appearance, aroma, creaminess, sweetness, flavor, and aftertaste, using a 5-point hedonic scale to determine if preference difference are statistically linear or random. Data is validated via one-way ANOVA to test the null hypothesis against the alternative hypothesis. Next procedure. Sample preparation. For commercial meat brands are carefully stored and sealed to a uniform temperature of 4 degrees Celsius plus to testing. Next, coding and bias control. To completely eliminate brand bias, exactly 20 ml of each milk sample is poured into clean 30 ml plastic cups, labeled with random 3-digit secret codes. Next, testing protocol. Panelists are seated in separate sensory board and instructed to sample from left to right according to a randomized presentation order. There is palate cleansing. Panelists take a small sip of mineral water before the first sample and between each subsequent brand to thoroughly clean their palates. Last but not least, digital data collection. Evaluation scores are input by panelists via mobile phone using an offline form access through a QR code. Automatically sends raw data to a master spreadsheet for ANOVA analysis.
Okay, now I will explain the graph section, which shows the sensory evaluation result for the four milk brands based on the mean score given by the panelists. For the color or appearance attribute, the graph shows that the mean score for all four milk brands are quite similar. This means that the panelists generally found the appearance of all milk samples acceptable, and there was no obvious difference in terms of color. Although one brand may have scored slightly higher than the others, the overall trend shows that appearance was not a major factor that strongly differentiates the milk brands. Next. Next is aroma attributes. Based on the graph here, the aroma scores among the four milk brands are also very close to each other, if you can see the number here. This suggests that the panelists did not perceive a very large difference in smell between the milk and samples. In other words, all brands had an aroma that was generally acceptable to the panelists, with only slight variation in preference. Moving on to sweetness, the graph shows that Good Day again obtained the highest mean score among the four brands here: 3.3, 3.9, 3.37, and 3.43. This means that the sweetness level of Good Day was more preferred by the panelists compared to the other mixed samples. The higher score may indicate that its sweetness was more balanced or more pleasant to the taste of the panelists. For this taste or flavor, the scores of the brands are still relatively close, but Good Day and Farm Fresh here, Good Day and Farm Fresh show slightly better performance compared to the other brands, which is Dutch Lady and Fernleaf. This suggests that these two brands were more like in terms of overall flavor. However, the difference is still not very large. So we can say that all four milk brands were generally acceptable in taste. For aftertaste, the graph shows only a small difference among the milk brands. This means that the lingering taste after panelists swallowing the milk was fairly similar for all samples. Although one brand may have a slightly better score, the overall pattern suggests that aftertaste was acceptable across all four brands. For the creaminess, we can see a clearer difference compared to the previous attributes. Good Day record the highest mean score for creaminess, which indicates that the panelists found it to be richer, smoother, and creamier compared to usually Fernleaf and Farm Fresh. This may suggest that Good Day had a more desirable mouthfeel, which contribute positively to the panelists' preference. On to the overall acceptability graph, Good Day ranked first with the highest score, followed by Dutch Lady, Fernleaf, and Farm Fresh. This means that based on the average panelist response, Good Day appeared to be the most preferred milk brand overall. However, the difference between the brands was still quite small, showing that all four milk brands were generally accepted by the panelists. This rather gives a clearer visual summary of the sensory power for all four milk brands across all taste attributes. From the graph, we can see that Good Day covers a larger area in several categories, especially creaminess and sweetness. Here, as you can see, which indicates stronger performance in those attributes. This makes Good Day appear as the visual winner in the descriptive analysis, because it performed all across most of the sensory attributes. However, although Good Day looks like the best brand from the graph, the difference among the brands are still relatively small. In conclusion, based on the descriptive graph, Good Day appeared to be the most preferred brand because it obtained the highest mean score in several sensory attributes, especially creaminess and sweetness. However, the graph only showed the average pattern of preference. To determine whether these differences are statistically significant, we need to refer to the one-way ANOVA results.
For data analysis, we were using one-way ANOVA. So after filling for each attributes, where we got aroma, color, sweetness, taste, aftertaste, and acceptability, it can be seen that the p-value is bigger than 0.5, meaning there are no significant difference among the sensory attributes. All attributes were equally accepted by the panelists, where the color has the highest mean score, which is 3.71, and aftertaste having the lowest mean score with 3.38 points. So that's all for data analysis.
Thank you, Mariam, for presenting the data analysis. So let me continue with the discussion. First, we will start with research objective and methodology. So our goal of this experiment is to compare the sensory profile and consumer preference of four milk brands, which is Dutch Lady, Good Day, Fernleaf, and also Farm Fresh. So there are 7 attributes that we have been tested, which is color, aroma, creaminess, sweetness, taste, and aftertaste. We also have an overall acceptability. So the methods that we use is an effective test, 5-point hedonic scale from 1 to 5. For the statistical tools, we are using the descriptive charts, which is Rida and Ba, and inferential statistics, one-way ANOVA, and two-case HSD. Next, the descriptive results, which is the visual winner based on the average of the mean scores. Good Day emerged as the top performing brand. Let us see with the first attributes, which is creaminess. Good Day achieved a 4.00, the highest score in the entire study, suggesting a superior fat to protein ratio. For the sweetness and taste, Good Day dominated sweetness 3.9 and tied with Farm Fresh for best taste 3.80. For the overall acceptability, Good Day ranked the first, which is it gains 3.03, followed by Dutch Lady, Fernleaf, and Farm Fresh. For the radar plot, visually Good Day's fingerprint eclipses all other brands across almost every category. For the statistical reality, we despite that Good Day looking like the clear winner on the charts, but the one-way ANOVA told a different story. We can see the p-value is 0.635 for a significance level 0.05. Since 0.635 is larger than 0.05, we failed to reject the null hypothesis. So the conclusion that we can conclude here, there is no statistically significant difference between the four brands. The variations observed in the scores are likely due to random chance or experimental error rather than actual differences in product quality.
In conclusion, 4 full cream milk brands were evaluated based on sensory attributes. Good Day recorded the highest mean scores for most attributes. However, the ANOVA results showed no significant difference among the brands, so the null hypothesis was accepted. Overall, all 4 brands were well accepted by the panelists.